In 2009, I discovered NintendoCapriSun's Majora's Mask Let's Play for the Nintendo 64. In this Let's Play, he ends his final preparations in a new cycle before going inside the moon by beating the 4 temples bosses and doing some of the side quests again, namely the 2 most important and impactful ones, the Romani-Ranch-sidequest and the Anju and Kafei-sidequest. This inspired me and got me thinking. If we extend the idea further, how far can we go? How many people can we save in one cycle? This question is what this video is about. Before we start this challenge, let us first establish some ground rules. This helps to clarify what is and isn't allowed in this challenge. 1. Only one 3-day cycle is available, and no Song of Time is allowed. Duh. 2. Beating a dungeon's boss implies not only having bet the dungeon and collected all stray fairies, but also having bet a previous mini-dungeon in the same area. 3. No cheats, hacks, or exploits are allowed. However, intense usage of the Virtual Console save game system is allowed. You know, being more efficient and all that. 4. Saving a person means playing to the point of getting a reward from them, usually a mask or a heart piece in a previous cycle. 5. Only people need saving who have an objective problem to deal with, so no minigames. Fuck that swarm shooting gallery minigame. This means I have to rule out double missions, like saving the postman and Madame Aroma at the same time, for example. Strictly speaking, according to Rule 4, I can only save one of them, since I cannot receive a reward from both of them in one cycle. However, since Madame Aroma, when going the postman route, technically receives the quest item of Kafei's letter and has a positive reaction to it afterwards, I consider her half-saved. Maybe bending Rule 4 slightly to my favor, but I guess it's okay. Now, some words about Rule 2. I assume mini-dungeons, like the Pirate's Fortress and Ikana Castle, are retroactively cleared as well after defeating the boss. This retroactive action Link supposedly has taken while the player in reality hasn't is actually confirmed in the game. While recently playing Majora's Mask again, I did the Great Bay Temple without having done some prior jam sessions with Swell Guy Jabaz and Jerk Evan. However, after having defeated Gyork and restored order and peace to Great Bay, the Indiegogos still did a rehearsal with this song invented by Mikau and Jabaz during these jam sessions, which Evan takes credit for. I will use the Fierce Deity's mask to defeat the bosses efficiently. Now, technically you only obtain this mask after having collected all other 24 masks in the game, meaning having solved everyone's problems already at least once. But screw it. It's about efficiency. If all logical contradictions and implications of Majora's Mask time travel are hand-waved away by a comment from the Happy Mask salesman, so can I. We just assume the game retcons itself or puts an off-screen action by Link there. There are some side quests which have set times Link has to abide to in order to complete them and help the people involved, meaning I can't do anything other than these specific side quests at these specific times. I therefore need to structure the rest of my gameplay, doing more lenient side quests, fighting bosses, etc. around these fixed times. However, as there aren't too many of them, mostly covering the 2 lengthiest, most complex and time-consuming side quests, Romani-Ranch and Anju and Kafei, I still have plenty of room to improvise in this 3-day cycle. This video is more made from a technical gameplay perspective and not from a lore one. There are some loose ends I need to mention. I consider people like Captain Whisken, the swordsman, and Professor Shikashi saved by merely beating the game, as their problems stem from the moon crashing down on Termina, so I solve their problems by making the moon return to its orbit. I decided to let Link the Goron stay in his rented room in the Stockpot Inn and not steal his key, as there would be no benefit or reason of having him sleep on the streets of East Clocktown. No need to worsen his life. Another point to discuss is the Deco Merchant trading side quest. I was wondering and pondering for a long time about this. At first it was clear to me that I have to save ... from his misfortune in the toilet in Stockpot Inn. But then I remembered that if I gave him the town title deed, I would completely lock myself out of the Deku trading side quest. What to do? I ultimately decided to do half of the trading side quest up to the point of getting the mountain title deed, saving to Deku merchants, and then give ... this sheet of paper. As the Great Bay Deco Merchant and the Ikana Deco Merchant end up being unhappier in their new locations than before leaving, I decided I'd be doing them an unknown favor by not letting them transfer to a new place. Having said all that, let's waste no more time. Without further ado, here's my side quest challenge of saving as many characters in Majora's Mask in a single 3-day cycle as possible. Well then, let us begin. Just like in a normal playthrough of Majora's Mask, I immediately play the inverted Song of Time to slow down time to a third of its original pace. Also, Bunnyhood is worn almost always, of course. The inverted Song of Time, the Bunnyhood, and the Song of Soaring are my invaluable friends during this adventure. I began with getting the usual obligatory 200 rupees from the East Clocktown rooftop and the Clocktown sewers. While I was in the sewers, I also got the Moon's Tear. Then I made my way to the laundry pool, activating the Deco Merchant while going there, collecting the stray fairy. After that, I traded the Moon's Tear for the Clocktown title deed. Going to West Clocktown after that, I withdrew 300 rupees from the bank, and I bought some stuff as to not waste any time farming for things. I bought a fairy, 50 arrows, 10 deku nuts, 30 bombs, and a powder keg. Unfortunately, I forgot to buy deku sticks and a red potion at that point, so I had to buy these things at a later point in my run. I briefly continued to North Clocktown to restore the Great Fairy. My plan is to do as much stuff as possible in one area, as to reduce travel time between areas to a minimum. I try to go in order of Clocktown, Woodfall, Snowhead, Great Bay, Ikana. But I of course have to backtrack for a lot of side quests to Clocktown and Romani-Ranch specifically. As it still wasn't 10 o'clock and I couldn't enter the mayor's office, I moved on towards Woodfall. By now, it was 7:30 AM. In Woodfall region, I accidentally soared to Woodfall proper first, instead of the southern swamps. Using this slight mistake to my advantage, I activated Woodfall Temple by playing the Sonata of Awakening, and then soared away. Finally choosing the right destination to fast travel to, I visited the Deco Merchant to trade in my Clocktown title deed for a Swamp title deed, but unfortunately forgot to buy some magic beans for the Swamp Spider House later on. I then went on my way to the Woods of Mysteries and rescued Kume, with a quick stop at the Magic Eggs potion shop to finally buy a red potion. At least Kume now got Kotake's potion to drink and get refreshed. After that, I continued my way across the swamp to the frog sitting on a tree stump and got my first frog for the choir. I then made my way back to Woodfall and beelined through the temple to the Gecko mini-boss, defeating it with the Great Fairy Sword, 1 ice and 1 fire arrow, to assemble another frog. Quickly soaring to the entrance again, I faced Odolwa with the Fierce Deity's mask and defeated Odolwa in 6 seconds. I then brought the Deco Princess to the palace because I was in the area and thought why not? By now it was 10 AM. I walked to Milk Road and blew up the boulder blocking the entrance to Romani Ranch. There I talked to Romani and thus activated the alien side quest, and then visited Grog to turn all his fledglings into grown-up cuckoos. Unfortunately, Romani forced me to practice shooting balloons with the Polar. Luckily, however, this timer didn't count towards the 3-day cycle, so it was just 11 AM when I left Romani Ranch. I had some time to kill, since I wanted to combine visiting Anju, Majora, and Madame Aroma after 2 PM, so I spent some hours in the Swarm Spider House, collecting some gold sculptures. But first, I needed some equipment to do this task as fast and efficient as possible, so I walked back to Clocktown and bought 2 magic beans from the former Swarm Deco Merchant, and also bought 2 deco sticks. I then walked to Woodfall and made my way to the Swarm Spider House. There, I caught 3 bugs and filled 2 bottles with fresh water. So I actually had all my 6 bottles filled. It was pretty handy having 6 bottles, definitely. I collected all gold sculptures before 2 PM, so I still had some time left. I decided to do Snowhead region early, so I went into Snowhead Temple, playing the Goron Lullaby, and defeated Goth. I wanted to use the Fierce Deity's mask, but I couldn't hit Goth in the right angle for him to fall down, so I defeated him purely as a Goron. I then walked to Clocktown, talked to Anju about Cafe, freed Majora from the tedious discussion using the couple's mask, and talked to Madame Aroma wearing Cafe's mask. After doing this, I traveled to Wikana Graveyard and fought Skull Keeter, freeing him from his eternal duty. Since it was already almost 5 PM, I decided to call it quits for the first day and played the Song of Double Time, since I still had something to do on the graveyard at night. I immediately put on the captain's hat and ordered the Ikana soldiers to open the grave. Traveling down and defeating all the enemies, the great fairy sword worked wonders against the Iron Knuckle. I freed Flat from his trapped existence. As there was less to do this night than before while it was day, and as I had to activate specific events at specific times, I sped up time by playing the inverted Song of Time. I then made a short detour to now liberated Snowhead region and Goron village to trade in the Swarm title deed for the Mountain title deed at the Snowhead Deco Merchant. Moving on to Clocktown, as there were quite some things to do there. First, I went to the laundry pool and talked to Guru Guru, letting him tell a story of his past. While there, I also talked to the frog to assemble another member of the choir. I then made my way to West Clocktown and used Kamado's mask to perform a dance for the Rosa sisters. Moving on to East Clocktown. At first I entered Milk Bar at 10 PM and helped Toto and Gorman by performing the Ballad of the Windfish as all 4 races. After finishing this, it was almost time for meeting Anju at 11:30 PM at the Stockpot Inn. Taking her letter, it was promised to put the letter into a postbox. Question mark, question mark, question mark was on my way out, so I gave him some paper by getting rid of Anju's letter, I mean the mountain title deed. I could have saved the old lady from the bomb shop from getting robbed by Sacom, but as it would have prevented me from saving the most amount of people in a single cycle, I didn't do it. Some sacrifices, unfortunately, must be made for the greater good. As much as I would have liked to shoot that jerk Sakon with a bow, I unfortunately couldn't do that, since I wanted to finish the Anju and Cafe side quest. Moving on to the north and leaving Clocktown, I found Kamado dancing on these weird rock mushrooms and healed his soul as well. Kinda weird, I used his mask to dance for the Rosa sisters before healing him. Time was running out, so I quickly made my way to Romani Ranch to keep my promise for Romani and be there to protect the cows and Romani Ranch. This was done without any problem, and thus Romani Ranch was saved for another year. By now it was almost morning, so I just waited the last in-game minutes out at Romani Ranch to reach the dawn of the second day. This day was for many hours spent at Great Bay region. My first task was to free the two seahorses. This, however, would be a somewhat lengthy task. At first, I had to sneak into the pirate's fortress to get a picture of a Gerudo pirate for a pervy old fisherman. Using the stone mask, this was no difficult task. Returning to the fisherman's hut, I received the seahorse. Now came the more tedious part. I traveled to Pinnacle Rock and used the seahorse to traverse the foggy area. Defeating all the sea snakes took some in-game hours, but I finally did it. I ignored collecting the Zora eggs since, as I said earlier, I considered them safe after completing the dungeon of Great Bay. In the end, both seahorses were happily reunited again. So cute! Now it was time to enter Great Bay Temple, playing the new wave bossa nova, hookshotting on the back of giant turtle, the usual things. During the fight against Georg, my hopes came true. I had hoped of being able to damage Georg with the energy discs coming out of the fierce deity's sword. And this is exactly how the fight went. Defeating Georg in around 10 to 12 seconds was extremely satisfying. While in Great Bay Temple, I also got another frog for the choir. By now it was late noon or early afternoon. I still had some time to kill until I could meet Kafei, so I went collecting some rupees in Clocktown. For example, the chest in South Clocktown above the entrance to East Clocktown. At 4 p.m. the postman had delivered the letter to Kafei, and Link met him inside the laundry pool hideout. After the conversation had ended, I made my way to the Stockpot Inn and gave Anju the pendant. By now it was almost 6 p.m, so I quickly traveled to Romani Ranch and, as agreed, met up with Cremia for her delivery of milk to Clocktown. I immediately talked to Cremia and started the milk delivery mission. Fending off the Gorman brothers was no problem, so the carriage was protected and arrived safely at the outskirts of East Clocktown. I unfortunately only got the second best reward of 200 rupees, but at least I now had a full wallet. Using this, I wanted to buy a red potion for Shiro and a Chateau Romani, but since it still wasn't 10 o'clock, I had to settle for the potion for now. After this, it was Ikana time. I began by moving upward the canyon towards the spring and its cave. Playing this Song of Healing too sharp at first unfortunately had no effect, so I had to drown him in 1,000 years of raindrops, thus healing his soul and lifting the curse placed upon him, presumably by Majora. By doing this, Ikana Canyon is flooded again, and Pamela leaves her house to investigate this phenomenon. Using the stone mask, I snuck into the house and healed Pamela's father from his cursed state. Still having some time left until 10 p.m, I left Ikana Canyon by foot, heading onto the road to Ikana. There, I gave Shiro the red potion and got 5 rupees in return. By now, it was almost 10 p.m, so I walked to Clocktown and went to its eastern district. I entered the milk bar and bought a Chateau Romani for 200 rupees. After drinking it and thereby gaining unlimited magic, I made my way to Stone Tower Temple. It was a pleasant experience having unlimited magic for the giant's mask in this fight, and making full usage of this, not having to use this mask as scarcely as I normally would. After defeating Twin Mode, I still had plenty of hours left, but nothing more really planned, so I played the Song of Double Time. And that was basically the night of the second day. I did the least amount of things on the third day, only 3 to be exact. At first, I quickly walked to Snow White region to conduct the now fully assembled frog choir, cosplaying as Don Gero. It didn't amount to anything as a reward, but I did it out of staying faithful to the principle of this video. Then I started the main task of the day, the Oceanside Spider House. Even with the Song of Inverted Time activated, I did spend some hours collecting all gold sculptures. It was early afternoon when I exited Great Bay region. I walked to Clocktown and deactivated the Song of Inverted Time, as I had to wait a little bit and not much tasks left to do. Around 4 p.m. I went to the laundry pool and visited the curiosity shop owner in Kafei's hideout and got the priority mail. Warping to Ikana Valley, I crossed the river to the shore on the other side. It was almost time for Kafei and Sakon to arrive. I played the Song of Double Time to slightly speed up things. The final night arrived. When playing the Song of Double Time, I did an ever so slight mistake as to not position myself behind the pile of rocks Kafei hides behind. Therefore, I had to put the stone mask on and sneak past the arriving Sakon towards Kafei. Everything went well, and the thief detected neither of us. We entered Sakon's hideout. The trial itself wasn't very difficult. I had to think for 3 minutes again about the order Kafei had to push the blocks, but other than that it wasn't a problem in the slightest. One-shotting Wolfos with the Great Fairy Sword is so satisfying. Kafei got the sun mask back, we exited the hideout, and he made his way to Clocktown. By now it was midnight. I followed him by playing the Song of Soaring. Still had some other things to do besides the Anju and Kafei-sidequest. Back in Clocktown, I went to the postman's office to give this poor soul a final job and handed him the letter to Madame Aroma. Making his way to Milk Bar, I meanwhile fooled around a bit and talked to all 4 guards, maybe to provide them some company. Back in Milk Bar, the postman gave Madame Aroma the priority mail and we exited Milk Bar. This time, interestingly, he kept his hat on as he fled Clocktown. Like I said earlier, I consider not only the postman saved, but also Madame Aroma half saved as well, since she technically did receive the letter and was objectively in a happy and satisfied mood. I then went to visit Anju in the Stockpot Inn, and together we waited for Kafei. He arrived at 4:30 a.m. Time was running out for all of us. The 2 of them exchanged their wedding mask and officially became a couple, gifting me the couple's mask. I listened to their final words, and as I left the room, I remembered the words NintendoCapriSun said when he completed the side quest in his Let's Play. I'm gonna make sure that there's a morning for you guys to greet. This scene from him was my inspiration for making this video and doing this challenge. Making my way to South Clocktown, I too only had less than a minute left. I rushed to the banker to deposit in the bank the 347 rupees I had left, to let him see a customer achieve 5,000 rupees on their bank account. Now I had saved every person in Termina I could think of and had made them happy. All that was left to do was to confront Skull Kid and Majora atop the clock tower. So I did, by playing the Oath to Order, after which Tettle and Link made their way upwards towards the moon. Ignoring the 4 children mirroring the temple's boss's remains, I beelined towards the child mirroring Majora's mask and agreed to play with him. The following battle was a lot of fun, fighting Majora not only with the fierce Deity's mask but also with infinite magic from Chateau Romani, shout out to best girl in Majora's mask, was extremely fun and entertaining, albeit short-lived, as you would expect. By defeating Majora, we also saved Skull Kid, who was the last person on my list in need of saving. And so, we finally wrapped things up and ended the game. A new day dawned upon Termina. Well, there you have it. Every person in Termina saved in a single 3-day cycle, with optimal gameplay, access to all items, and availability of all upgrades, that is. It was a lot of fun, planning my overall strategy on each day, playing through all of this while executing my pre-planned route, and saving everyone we know and love in Majora's Mask. However, it was also a long run. I made the mistake of not immediately writing down my adventures in-game, so I sometimes had to recollect my memories when writing the script and retelling my stories afterwards. What are my closing thoughts on this challenge? The first day definitely was the time I had to do the most of stuff, and where I was the least flexible in switching things around. Certainly, this run could be optimized to include some minigames and maybe some mini-dungeons if people are fast enough to solve them, but I'm definitely not the one to do it. It still was a really interesting challenge nonetheless.